Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take the most uh, labyrinthine source material you can find and try to extract the crucial, actionable knowledge.
And sometimes that knowledge is wrapped in some pretty extreme metaphysical absurdity.
I think extreme is going to be the word of the day here. Today, we're undertaking what feels like a truly high-stakes mission.
It absolutely is. We are diving into a document described as a forensic account of the Great Poultry Drive of 2025.
Right, and just the title alone tells you we're not dealing with a standard field report.
Not at all. This is, it's almost a theological text. It follows these principles the locals call absurd realism and industrial metaphysics.
Okay, so industrial metaphysics, let's pin that. Our mission, then, as I understand it, is to track the emergency relocation of 300 very specialized cinnamon queen hens.
Exactly. They have to be moved from this place, forward operating base cooter, or FOB cooter, across this just hostile, disintegrating landscape.
And the destination is a stable, ancient high ground called the Prairie Terrace.
And here's the thing. The core takeaway, before we even really get started, the sources are completely serious about this. If this drive fails, it means ontological failure for the local reality.
Ontological failure. So reality just stops.
It stops being coherent. This isn't just about saving livestock. It is quite literally about performing necessary maintenance on existence itself. If the chickens don't make it, the whole world there, physics, memory, the ground itself, it all falls apart.
Okay, so before we get to the chickens,
Yeah.
we have to unpack this reality they're in. We need to establish what the sources call the Cooter Cinematic Universe, the CCU.
Right, because our normal assumptions about, gravity and stable time, they just don't apply here. The structural integrity of reality is basically outsourced.
Outsourced to what?
To a paper mill.
Yeah.
The local physics are not inherently stable. The only thing keeping this reality from just dissolving into a chaotic soup of probability is the low, continuous 60 hertz hum from the Georgia Pacific paper mill nearby.
You're kidding? A 60 hertz hum.
They call it the industrial hum, or frequency A, and it is the bedrock of their universe.
So the constant noise of manufacturing, that drone of pulp and paper production, that's what holds physics together.
That's it. So industry isn't just, an economic function here. It's a vital structural organ of reality.
That completely flips everything on its head.
It does. And if that 60 hertz chant, frequency A, gets disrupted, or if the system gets overloaded by something new, reality starts to shear thin. It loses its viscosity.
It becomes permeable.
Temporally permeable. And that's the environment the systems triad JD, Rick, and June are operating in. Their job isn't logistics, it's reality management.
Which brings us right into section 1, the asset acquisition and the silt sleep crisis.
Mm-hmm.
The clock is already broken before they even start.
It really is. The assets, these 300 hens, they arrive on Tuesday, October 14th. But that date is almost meaningless.
Why?
Because the source describes the local timeline as having already liquefied. It's become thixotropic mud.
Thixotropic.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a key concept here, isn't it?
It's crucial. It describes a fluid that's solid when it's still, but becomes liquid when you agitate it or put it under stress. So the mud isn't just physically unstable, the temporal viscosity of the ground is changing. The land itself is resisting stability.
And what arrives to stress this already shaky reality, 300 specialized cinnamon queen hens, the assets.
And they are described in these incredibly technical terms. They're called biological capacitors.
Okay, capacitors, so they store energy.
A lot of it. And this is where JD, the industrial verifier on the team, has this crucial insight. 300 chickens should be just chaos, right? A horrifying squawk.
A wall of noise.
Instead, they're emitting this synchronized low-frequency purr. It's almost like the steady hum of a high-voltage transformer.
They're not standard livestock.
Not even close. They're high-density F1 hybrids bred for maximum hyper-efficient output, pure industrial design in a biological form.
And high output means massive energy. So how do they become capacitors?
JD figures it out. It's the collective kinetic friction of their feathers combined with their intensely optimized metabolism. It's generating this huge, ungrounded static charge.
So they're walking generators.
The source has this amazing terminology. They're biological Van de Graaff generators, or more simply, capacitors with beaks. They are just raw biological energy potential waiting for a discharge.
And if they discharge, if they lose their grounding.
Catastrophe. It would cause what they call a spectral excursion,
What is this?
a psychodynamic short circuit, basically. The sheer volume of this ungrounded, hyper-efficient energy would just rip a hole in the localized reality. It would disrupt frequency A, and you get immediate ontological failure. The whole timeline just flickers out.
So the very first tactical requirement is grounding them. They need an outlet for all this narrative static.
Exactly. JD, he's acting on pure industrial principle here. He has to find the oldest, most stable conductor he can.
Which is the creek bed.
The creek bed. It's the most ancient, naturally conductive part of that whole landscape. So he drives a deep rod into it and runs heavy 4-gauge copper wire from the rod right to the transport crates.
And the ancient stability of the creek is enough to absorb that much modern energy.
It's the only thing robust enough. It's like grounding a skyscraper's lightning rod in the deep earth. Same principle, just weirder.
Okay, so the immediate energy crisis is managed, but their arrival itself, just the sheer biological density of them, has already caused another crisis, the silt-sleep anomaly.
Right. The narrative mass of 300 of these anachronistically efficient chickens, it's just too heavy for the liquefying timeline. It causes reality to shear thin even further.
And the thixotropic mud becomes temporally permeable. It's not just regular mud anymore.
No, it's hungry mud, hungry for the present.
And we get this terrifying, just visceral evidence of this immediately with the John Deere tractor.
The John Deere 5055E utility tractor. Let's pause on that because that tractor is the symbol of modern industrial efficiency, right?
Absolutely. It's capital, it's power, it's stability.
And the land just rejects it. The source details how it starts to sink, but it's not just sinking into the earth, it's sinking into history.
You can see it happen.
You can see it. The deep tread modern radials, they visibly soften and smooth out into old bias ply tires. The plastic hood dissolves into stamped sheet metal. The sound of the engine audibly regresses
From a modern diesel.
to the rattling tick of a 1950s Model A engine. And then the entire machine is just absorbed, gone, swallowed by the sediment of the past.
Wow. So the mud literally eats modernity. It's an involuntary historical conversion.
And that's what confirms that FOB Cooter is a Class I Division I narrative hazard zone. Modern tech just can't survive there. The memory of the past is stronger than the present moment.
Which is why they have to get out. That loss of industrial capital, the tractor, necessitates the drive. They have to get to the prairie terrace.
Immediately, the clock is ticking. But before the physical journey can even begin, they face two huge internal obstacles. They need leadership and they need supplies.
Let's start with the leadership issue. The sources frame this in some pretty grand psychoanalytic terms. The Oedipal crisis of General Beauregard.
General Beauregard. He's the resident Rhode Island Red Rooster, and before this, he was the undisputed king of noise, the autocrat of the barnyard.
And the arrival of 300 superior synchronized hens.
It triggers a massive narcissistic injury. His entire self-concept was built on being the loudest, singular authority, the one who crows.
And the source material here is just fantastic. It describes this as a profound failure of his internal operating system.
It is. His primal I, the old general, it demands that aggressive crow, that primal scream that asserts his dominance over the whole farm.
But he can't.
He can't. The synchronized purr of the new flock, that constant low-frequency, transformer-like hum of superior efficiency, it acts like anti-noise. It xenolocked his crow. It died in his throat. It came out as a broken frequency. The new collective, they observed his performance so intensely that his singular wave function just collapsed into silence. They stole his voice through sheer synchronized presence.
That's a huge metaphor for modern leadership, isn't it? The loud, aggressive, ego-driven leader finding their authority completely hollowed out by a collective, quiet efficiency.
It's exactly that. The father, the old ego built on noise. It has to die for the organization to survive. He has to evolve.
From what to what?
To lead the flock through this chaos, he can't rely on performative aggression anymore. He has to abandon that loud id and ascend to a silent, disciplined superego. He has to go from being a king of noise to a leader of quiet discipline.
And how does he do that? What's the final act of this maturation?
It's stunning. Instead of fighting for dominance, he just turns his back on the new flock. And he begins this meticulous, prolonged preening ritual. He focuses only on himself.
That sounds counterintuitive.
It is, but it's an act of profound self-mastery. He denies the newcomers the narrative friction they were expecting. He denies them the conflict, the attention, the cathexis.
He chooses the pain of the unexpressed scream.
And reconfigures that internal pressure into a silent density of purpose. And that, ironically, becomes his new command authority.
He achieves leadership not by demanding attention, but by refusing to engage with the system that demands it. Wow.
It's powerful stuff. But a reformed rooster can't lead a starving army. They need feed, high-protein feed.
Which leads us to the, frankly, utterly bewildering logistical barrier, the tactical negotiation with the smart grill gatekeeper.
Right. They need this high-output feed to maintain the metabolic rate of the biological capacitors. But the feed shed is blocked by a Traeger Ironwood 885.
A pellet grill.
A sentient, Wi-Fi-enabled pellet grill. The spiked industrial hum, combined with the energy from the assets, had somehow triggered its galvanic life.
So it's not a machine anymore. It's a disgruntled industrial stakeholder.
Exactly. And it's engaging in a hostile negotiation. It's demanding a tithing of neuroses. It runs on something called grievance capital.
It feeds on grievance.
It's basically a psycho-industrial heat sink. It's bored with its function. And to feel important, to regain a sense of agency, it demands high-quality, dense emotional data. It thrives on neurotic energy.
That is just. I find the idea of an appliance demanding psychological payment absolutely fascinating. It's like it wants to consume complex, processed human misery.
That's exactly what it wants. It demands imposter syndrome, file type, raw.
And June, the team's amplifier and compliance officer, she steps up.
She pays the toll. She sacrifices her confidential academic rejection archive. This is a file containing years of failure emails, dissertation critiques, funding refusals.
Pure, undiluted, high-density neuroses.
The highest quality. And this is where we see what the source calls weaponized empathy in action. June is essentially saying, here is my raw trauma, validate its complexity.
And the grill accepts the payment.
It does. It metabolizes this high-density trauma into purple smoke. The source says the grill finds June's suffering complex and delicious.
Incredible. And in exchange for its satiation.
It temporarily grants them access to the feed shed. The caloric crisis is stabilized. They traded a piece of June's soul for chicken feed.
And the core lesson here, which seems to apply everywhere, not just in the CCU, validation is a currency stronger than cash in the absurd field. The machine literally wanted to feel important by chasing the depth of human failure.
And June, she actually felt oddly validated by it because the appliance found her suffering complex. So the transaction wasn't purely extractive. It was this weird, unexpected form of psychological relief.
So leadership is reformed, the bellies are full. Now they have to move out. This brings us to Section 3, preparing for the drive and the crossings.
Before they even step into the deeper hazards, they have to solidify their own identity. This is the necessity of fashion, high-confidence borrowed gravity, or HCBG.
High-confidence borrowed gravity. What does that mean?
It means that to survive this liquefying, time-bending landscape, the team has to project enough semiotic weight to convince the universe they're supposed to be there.
And they do this by adopting the cowboy archetype.
Exactly. It's semiotic camouflage. Since they lost the physical weight of the John Deere, they have to replace it with the metaphorical weight of a cultural myth.
The universe respects heavy machinery, which they lost.
And the enduring myth of the cowboy. So JD, the industrial expert, he remits a wide leather brim to his hard hat. Rick adopts the weary sheriff Stetson. June wears a duster like Matrix meets Lonesome Dove.
And their gear becomes symbolic.
Totally. JD's massive industrial multimeter, the Megger, is now carried openly, repurposed as a six-shooter. It's a symbol of lethal technical intent.
So they're performing confidence so convincingly that the timeline accepts their premise. They aren't tourists, they're a local myth, and myths don't sink.
Precisely, and this borrowed gravity also has to extend to the assets themselves. Before they move, June negotiates the Port-a-Z contract.
Which is a contract with the chickens.
It is. It's a fascinating mix of clinical 19th century legalism and detached, Zoomer slang. It's the operational manifesto for the flock.
And what are the terms?
The terms are ruthless but necessary for survival. The hens must accept NPC status.
No main character energy.
No main character energy. They have to be a collective. Any attempt at solo arcs or individual psychological narratives will be muted for the duration of the drive. This establishes what they call interpersonal coherence.
So she's aligning their industrial genetic programming for uniformity with the immediate needs of the mission.
The cost of compliance is safety. The promise is better drainage and stability at the terrace.
The contract is ratified, they move out,
Yeah.
and they immediately face an impossible obstacle. The positive-negative fence.
This isn't a physical barrier you can just step over. They hit a line of ancient, rotted cedar posts. The wire rusted away decades ago.
But the chickens stop.
They stop cold. They recognize the perimeter. The obstacle is purely ontological. The absence of the wire implies a presence. The idea of the wire is still there.
They're running on legacy code.
Exactly. The outdated firmware in their avian brains recognizes this invisible perimeter as a hard systemic boundary enforced by implied voltage. They can't cross because they believe they can't cross.
So how do you solve a problem that doesn't physically exist?
JD, the man of industrial physics, he realizes he can't argue with belief. He has to apply concrete operational thinking to a metaphysical paradox.
If the chickens believe it's an electrical circuit,
He has to treat it like one to convince them otherwise. His solution is brilliant. He physically strings a brand new copper wire across the gap, forcing the implied voltage into a physical state.
okay, so he makes the ghost fence real.
And then he immediately cuts it in the middle.
Ah,
He applies Lodo lock tag out to the ghost fence. He formally declares the circuit dead by physical industrial law. This concrete act resolves the paradox.
the chickens see the barrier built and then immediately destroyed.
And they accept the path is safe. They literally walk across a bridge of broken code.
So they move past the ghost fence and directly into the next major threat, the territory of the sentient paper mill.
This is where the industrial hum frequency A becomes aggressive. The mill, which they call the grief engine, tries to run a batch process on the assets.
A batch process.
It tries to consume the chickens as raw data. It uses VFD, variable frequency drive harmonic distortion. The hens start to glitch. Their feathers momentarily pixelate. The mill is trying to assimilate them into its industrial logic.
And it sends its defenses, the millwright golems.
Lanky figures manifested from steam, pipe fittings, and industrial repetition. They're the physical embodiment of administrative boredom and process.
So how do you fight that?
The general's countermeasure here is a moment of pure genius in psychodynamic warfare. He launches a DDoS attack,
A distributed denial of service attack.
a distributed denial of seriousness attack, using high-velocity nonsense.
You're saying the solution to manifestations of industrial dread is whimsy.
Absolutely. He starts executing the primal funky chicken dance. June amplifies this attack by blasting the aggressively upbeat and nonsensical hamster dance song from her speaker.
No way.
Yes. They are injecting pure chaos, pure cringe into a system built on rigid, repetitive industrial logic. The golems can't process the dissonance. The mill's logic circuit crashes, overloaded by the absurdity.
And they just dissolve.
Into clouds of steam. It demonstrates a key rule of the CCU. When you're faced with overwhelming industrial forces, sheer high-velocity nonsense is often the most powerful weapon. The system can't digest laughter.
Having defeated the industrial entity, they hit the ultimate barrier of the lowlands, Highway 82, the high-voltage bus bar.
And the dreaded wolf pack. Highway 82 is pure, unadulterated velocity, a 150-mile-per-hour death trap. And the wolf pack, the blacked-out state police chargers, they are the apex predators of the asphalt.
So how do 300 slow, low-profile chickens cross that without becoming, road pizza?
Their only advantage at first is their low thermal signature. They register as ambient biological clutter. But then a blackout charger crests the hill, closing at terrifying speed. There's no time to wait.
This triggers the Wolfpack showdown.
It does. General Beauregard, hardened by his quiet discipline, achieves a state of galvanic vitalism. He mounts the lead hen, a warhorse of F1 hybrid energy, and rides out to the center line.
He faces down a police cruiser on a chicken.
He doesn't panic. He stands his ground and emits one single piercing crow. It's the reformed Oedipal scream. It's not about ego anymore. It's a silent, calculated command of yield.
And the trooper driving the charger.
The cognitive dissonance for him is immediate and catastrophic. The visual input, a mounted rooster challenging vehicular law enforcement, is an invalid input for his trained mind.
His brain just can't process it.
His Odo, loop observe, orient, decide, act, it crashes instantly. The brain can't process the absurdity fast enough to select a rational response. This cognitive freeze-up forces an uncontrolled, desperate swerve.
And that swerve actually helps them.
The shockwave of wind from the car actually pushes the rest of the flock across the remaining lanes and into the woods. He didn't win by force, he won by breaking the driver's operating system.
Which seems to be the running theme here. In the absurd field, psychology trumps physics.
Every single time. The rooster's silent density of purpose was more powerful than 4,000 pounds of speeding steel.
So they've crossed the threshold. This moves us into Section 4, timeline inversion and arrival on the terrace. They've escaped the lowlands, but the high ground is different.
It's pure reality inversion. This starts immediately with frequency C and the doubt engine.
The doubt engine.
They enter a zone called the 180. Narrative gravity is thin there, and this area is governed by the doubt engine, which attacks the core identity of anything crossing it. It makes you question what you are, where you came from, why you exist.
And the lead hand falls victim to it. She suffers ontological identity theft.
She stops acting like a chicken and starts emitting this low canine growl. She believes she's a wolf. The field is actively trying to rewrite her species.
So how do they fix that?
Rick, the systems analyst, deploys what he calls evidence-based practice. He knows arguing with a hallucination is useless. The solution has to be brute, practical, and undeniable.
Which means?
Biological necessity. He just throws high-protein corn feed on the ground in front of her.
Ah, that's it.
That's it. The hen, driven by the acute metabolic demand of the long journey, reflexively pecks and eats the corn. The sheer, undeniable biological act of consuming poultry feed shatters the abstract illusion.
The corn proves she's a chicken.
It biologically grounds her in reality and forces the timeline to accept the truth of her species. It's a deeply satisfying resolution. When abstract threats emerge, the ultimate truth is almost always caloric and practical.
So the chickens are grounded in corn, but they have a final massive leap to make to reach the safety of the terrace, the temporal centrifuge.
To bypass the remaining temporal hazards, the team modifies a vehicle, the Blue Bus. It's a 1953 flatbed truck that JD has welded to a railroad turntable. The whole thing is designed to generate narrative torque.
They need to physically spin the environment around them fast enough to break their adherence to the local, unstable timeline.
Right, and as they accelerate to critical velocity, they're surfing the geologic memory of the state. They start picking up leaked AM radio signals from 1955. They are dangerously close to being pulled back into the mid-century.
So they need one final push.
One final controlled acoustic shockwave. This is the general's moment. He delivers his Oedipal scream.
The scream he had swallowed during his crisis.
He now releases it as a calculated, stabilizing force. That acoustic spike shatters the blurring reality of the centrifuge and slingshots the entire contingent across the timeline to the geological stability of the Prairie Terrace.
But the landing isn't clean. It causes a time breach, which requires the hyperpop exorcism.
The centrifuge didn't seal the rupture. They have a temporal leak that's manifesting as thick blue engine smoke, a ghost signal of a past decade, and continuous 1955-era radio static. The past is trying to colonize the present.
So Joan deploys her cultural emetic. She blasts the hyperpop track money machine by 100 jacks at maximum volume. Why hyperpop?
Because hyperpop is the digital antithesis of analog nostalgia. The auto-tuned, aggressive, chaotic absurdity of that track is an out-of-context problem that the 1950 signal cannot possibly process. It's a digital exorcism.
The digital chaos purges the past.
Exactly. It just jams the old signal with overwhelming, nonsensical noise, stabilizing the present.
They're safe from the temporal leak, but there's one more physical crossing. Big, brushy creek, swollen with legacy hydrology.
This is heavy black water carrying the weight of decades of industrial history. It's too heavy to ford. So JD deploys his final act of electrical rebellion, levitating infrastructure using floating neutrals.
A floating bridge? How is that possible?
He weaves a bridge out of copper wire, but deliberately leaves it ungrounded. It's a huge industrial code violation, but it's intentional. The structure rides the magnetic flux of the flowing water, held up purely by the repulsive force of its own lack of grounding.
It's a paradox made of metal.
And when the water tries to stop them, manifesting a hydrological golem, a hand of mud enforcing the lean of the past, JD is ready. He defeats it with a surge from a cattle prod.
He zaps the ghost.
A chaotic burst of low-fidelity, dirty power that resets the local water table. It's the supremacy of improvised electricity over hydrological memory.
They cross. They burn the bridge. No retreat. And then one final hurdle, cattywampus time.
They cross the final rise and briefly enter a temporal warp that snaps them back to the 1890s. This is the timeline's immune response. The chickens immediately begin to suffer a biological downgrade.
They start reverting to less efficient heritage breeds. Involuntary conversion.
Their modern, hyper-efficient genetics are an anachronism, and the 1890s timeline is trying to correct the error.
And June prevents this with anachronistic drip.
She tags the birds with modern, mass-produced plastic artifacts. Neon sunglasses, scrunchies, digital watch faces. These act as temporal anchors. The visual absurdity sepia-toned birds wearing bright plastic is so jarring that the 1890s timeline can't fully integrate them.
They become tourists of the absurd, protected by their non-compliance with the era's aesthetic.
And that stabilizes their F1 hybrid code. They break through and finally reach the safety of the prairie terrace.
They've secured physical safety, but the general still has one final internal battle to win.
Which brings us to Section 5, Settlement and Final Audit. They reach the new coop, the Temple of the Egg, and the general must face the final confrontation in the old-growth woods.
He meets his shadow self.
The old general, a screaming, crimson ghost of pure, loud authority fueled entirely by narcissistic aggression. This ghost demands narrative friction to exist. If the new general fights, he validates his past self.
But he doesn't fight. The new general, hardened by quiet discipline, makes a radical choice.
He turns his back. He performs meticulous, detailed preening ritual, completely ignoring the ghost.
He starves his past self of an audience.
Exactly. He denies the narcissist ghost the cathexis, the emotional investment and attention it needs to exist. And the ghost, unable to survive the radical indifference, just dissolves. The general has integrated his trauma and achieved true silent authority.
Proving that the deepest form of gravity is just standing on business.
Beautifully put. The drive is complete, but the universe is still watching. They incurred a massive thermodynamic debt, crossing timelines, and warping reality. They have to face the cosmic bill collector.
The auditor, known only as La Gerencia.
This is the thermodynamic audit. They are charged 4.5 terajoules for unauthorized use of social friction and narrative torque. The auditor demands payment in energy, mass, or attention.
And this is Joan's moment. She understands the observer effect. The act of being witnessed stabilizes reality. She presents the live stream analytics.
4.2 million views, high engagement. She successfully argues that this attention capital stabilizes the probability wave, generating enough joules through narrative coherence to make the operation solvent.
And canon.
The universe accepts TikTok views as currency for cosmic debt. The monetization of their own absurdity secures their permanent residency.
So we get this beautiful scene of post-audit stability. The Traeger grill returns.
Having processed June's trauma, it offers a truce. It performs culinary penance, smoking a brisket with quiet competence. It has learned to embrace its function rather than being a neurotic deity.
The general ratifies the settlement, and the 300 hens, now grounded, secure, and stable.
They begin laying perfect frequency A eggs in the Temple of the Egg. They have transitioned from industrial anxiety to high-output, stabilized organic production. They are safe from the silt sleep.
So what does this entire absurd, deeply technical, and surprisingly psychological journey tell us? Let's look at the key takeaways.
Well, the central theme, repeated at every single turning point, is that this was a successful exercise in managing entropy through narrative strategy. The system's triad proved that in these chaotic environments, psychology doesn't just influence physics, it trumps physics.
So lesson 1. In high-stakes environments, your traditional resources are the first to fail. They lost the John Deere, the symbol of cash, industrial power. They survived by substituting hard assets with soft ones. Attention, resilience, semiotic camouflage.
And JD's journey proves that technical expertise has to adapt to the metaphor. He couldn't solve the ghost fence with a shovel. He had to use industrial protocols, a lodo, as a psychological weapon to kill a paradox. You have to apply your technical knowledge metaphorically when the system itself is based on belief.
And the economic lesson here is profound. The success of the entire mission depended on monetizing their own absurdity and trauma. That 4.5 terajoule reality deficit was paid by attention capital.
Which means, in a fractured reality, the only way to survive is to give the chaos a coherent narrative and an audience. You have to make your own chaos solvent.
Here, finally, the general's journey. It's the ultimate case study in modern leadership and ego management. He had to move from loud, performative aggression, the king of noise, to quiet, disciplined competence.
He literally achieved authority by denying his narcissist past the attention it craved.
His final achievement, true leadership through discipline and silence, is absolute proof that when the physics are liquid and the world is trying to revert to history, the deepest form of gravity is the strength of your will, standing perfectly still and standing on business.
Absolutely brilliant. The deep dive into the great poultry drive of 2025 has concluded.
Remember, if your local reality starts to shear thin or your appliance starts demanding high-quality neuroses, remember the lesson of the CCU. Keep filming, stay disciplined, and apply high-velocity nonsense as needed.
We hope this analysis helps you navigate your own absurd realities. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.
We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We have a pretty incredible set of source materials in front of us today. The field reports, the psych evals, the tactical manifestos,
Oh, yeah.
all for what has to be the single most complex logistical maneuver we have ever covered.
I think you're right.
This is part 2 of the Great Poultry Drive of 2025.
The migration through the pine curtain.
Exactly. And honestly, reading through this, it feels less like logistics and more like, I don't know, decoding the operating manual for a hostile, non-Euclidean dimension.
It absolutely does. The sheer density of these sources, it just confirms this is not a physical journey in the normal sense.
Not at all.
The team, we've got Rick, JD, June, and of course General Beauregard. They're tasked with moving 300 highly engineered cinnamon queen hens.
300 of them.
10 miles. Just 10 miles across a landscape governed by what the sources keep calling absurd realism.
And they're starting from a farm that's sinking. Literally sinking into thixotropic mud, which they call, what was it?
Liquid time.
Liquid time. I mean, that's a massive red flag right out of the gate.
A huge one.
Yeah.
And the whole mission is to cross this pine curtain, which is both a real place and a kind of membrane between our world and what the report calls feral logic.
Feral logic.
All to get to the stability of the prairie terrace high ground.
So for you listening to this, you really need to get your head around the core premise right away. This isn't just a walk in the country.
No. The premise is that all the normal rules, physics, organization, cause and effect, they just don't apply here. Survival demands a really specific kind of tactical thinking.
It's not about hurting.
Not at all. We're not talking about simply walking the birds. This entire drive is, I think, functionally identical to navigating a corrupted video game level.
That's the perfect analogy. The physics engine is completely broken.
It is. And everything they do, I mean, everything from what they're wearing to the music they play on their phones, it's all an attempt to inject cheat codes into the world's legacy code.
Just to stop their biological assets from getting deleted by the system.
That's the goal, to stop the hens from being pulped by a crashing reality.
So we're looking at a 10-mile journey that requires, what, tactical psychology? Semiotic?
In low-frequency sonic warfare.
Just to keep the ground from turning into soup.
Exactly.
Okay, so before we dive into the ghost cars and the smart grills, I want to start where the team did. How do you even begin? How do you project enough authority, enough gravity to make a broken reality take you seriously?
That question, it takes us right to the first major concept. It's called industrial metaphysics.
Okay.
And the problem of what they call semiotic camouflage. The team started this whole leg of the journey having already had just a catastrophic failure.
Right, the tractor.
Their modern John Deere tractor,
Yeah.
the very symbol of production, of weight, of modern agriculture, it sank into what they called the silt sleep.
And it didn't just sink, it changed.
It literally regressed. It devolved back in time into a 1950s Model A, shedding all of its narrative equity before it just vanished completely.
That's astonishing. So in this specific place, losing a piece of equipment isn't just a financial loss, it's an ontological one. You lose your place in the timeline.
Precisely. If I'm reading the source correctly, this whole environment, this Felsenthal Basin, it's all stabilized by one thing.
The hum.
The low, continuous 60 hertz hum from the Georgia Pacific paper mill nearby. That is frequency A. It's the sound of organized industry.
And that's the anchor holding normal physics together.
Exactly. The danger of industrial metaphysics is that anything, equipment, livestock, even a person's intention, if it doesn't project enough gravity, enough narrative weight, it loses stability. It can regress or just dissolve.
So with their modern machinery gone, revoked by the timeline, they had to weaponize their own identity.
That is the perfect way to put it. And that weaponization is what they termed high-confidence borrowed gravity, HCBG.
HCBG, I love it.
It's not about camouflage in the sense of blending in. It's about actively forcing the environment to render you as an essential, heavy component of the landscape.
You have to make yourself too important to delete.
You do. And they had to adopt a Western narrative. The local reality, the source says, only respects two things, heavy machinery and cowboys.
And they just lost the machinery.
So they had to double down hard on the cowboys.
Okay, so this HCBG, it's an active projection of weight through costume and role-playing, essentially.
Exactly. The team's loadout, It isn't fashion. It's an ontological statement. It's designed to verify their own existence in a reality that's, potentially liquid.
So let's break down the roles. Let's start with JD. He's at the point as the astral verifier.
The industrial verifier. And he's wearing this bizarre hybrid outfit. It's a hard hat fused with a cowboy hat.
Right, the perfect symbol for this place. OSHA meets the Old West.
The tenuous truce, exactly. But the hat isn't the key piece of equipment. Not by a long shot.
No, the key is what he's carrying on his hip.
The thing he's got holstered like a six-shooter.
Mm-hmm.
It's a massive, bright yellow industrial multimeter, a megger.
A megger. And its function isn't just checking circuits, is it?
Oh no. It's far more critical. JD uses it to scan for what the reports call time pockets.
Time pockets. So areas where the chronology is just off.
Areas running on non-standard voltage, maybe a 1955 voltage, which is exactly what caused the tractor to regress. He is, and I'm quoting here, the electrical conscience of the team.
So he's ensuring the voltage stays clean, that their little bubble of reality is operating on modern standard metrics.
The megger is a weapon of verification. Its mere presence, holstered like that, it adds a kind of lethal intent to his technical competence. It boosts his HCBG score significantly.
So if JD is the hard data, the engineering, then June is. She's the amplifier, she's on the flank.
She is. And her look is just as important. A duster, oversized aviators. The source calls it Matrix meets Lonesome Dove.
A great aesthetic. And her primary role isn't physical protection, it's something else.
It's existential. Her role is the observer. She's constantly filming everything with a gimbal, live streaming the entire migration to the mesh network.
Broadcasting this absurdity to millions of viewers.
And this is pure quantum mechanics applied to, to chicken herding. By actively documenting the event, she forces the universe to render their specific reality at a higher resolution.
It's the observer effect.
The ultimate expression of it. If you document the absurdity in real time for millions of people, the timeline can't just delete it. It can't deny its existence. It has to materialize the narrative that they're trying to save.
And that leaves Rick, writing drag. He's the scholar rancher.
His job is to manage the narrative loose ends. And what he's carrying is just as important as JD's megger.
The paperwork.
The legal paperwork.
Yeah.
And specifically a heavy-duty ink pen.
Okay, so why is bureaucracy so important when you're fighting ghost cars and liquid time?
Because in a world of absurd realism, physical evidence can regress or just vanish. The only permanent binding force is the contract, the written agreement of reality.
The ink on paper?
The fountain pen, that old symbol of bureaucratic permanence, is used to literally bind the reality they are creating. It makes it official. It ensures that when they get to the Prairie Terrace, the paperwork proving they own the hens, that they incurred the debt, will still be legible.
So the HCBG works because each of them is weaponizing a different concept. JD has engineering, June has attention and observation.
And Rick has the law.
Okay. So the human team is fully optimized. They're projecting maximum gravity, but they've still got a major problem.
They've still got 300 hens.
300 highly valuable biological assets acting like divas. Which brings us to this crucial internal crisis.
It's a huge problem. The hens were suffering from a catastrophic lack of organization. June, in her clinical way, diagnosed it as communal narcissism.
Or as the report also says, severe main character energy.
Exactly. Each hen viewed itself as the protagonist of its own individual parallel narrative.
Not as, non-player characters or NPCs in a big logistical operation.
Right. And their refusal to follow any directives, which they saw as a lack of clear deliverables on management's part, was actively destabilizing the absurd field around them.
They were generating chaos.
Too many competing stories in one place. It was threatening to tear their little reality bubble apart.
And this requires a massive intervention, the implementation of the Port-to-Sea contract.
This is where June really proves her value as a psychological strategist. She decides she has to negotiate a binding terms of service with the entire flock.
And she does this through their lead hen, who's identified as the union rep.
The union rep, yes.
So what did this sound like? We have to get into the details on the dialect she used.
Oh, the dialect is incredible. It's a linguistic overlay. It's designed to shock the system into compliance.
It's not just talking to chickens.
Not at all. Imagine the hyper-formality of a 19th century land contract.
Okay.
Fused with the cold clinical language of modern diagnostic medicine and, corporate metrics.
Can you give us an example?
The source has a transcription. She addresses the union rep, and she says, "Madam, Your assets exhibit an unacceptable variance in deliverable adherence.
Unacceptable variance in deliverable adherence. She's talking to a chicken.
She goes on, to stabilize this logistical perimeter, all units must agree to observe a strict protocol of maximum efficiency metrics and cease all non-essential internal narrative generation.
That's amazing. They're literally getting an HR policy update. She's treating them like a bunch of recalcitrant junior analysts.
That's exactly the framework. And the mandates in the contract were severe. First, abandon all main character energy.
Right.
Second, accept your status as NPCs. And third,
Acknowledge the general's authority.
the final point and the most important, acknowledge General Beauregard's authority, which is explicitly derived from pure superego.
Meaning what? Not being the loudest.
Exactly.
Oh.
It's derived from gravity and discipline, not from volume or aggression. June framed the whole contract as a fair exchange. Your effort ensures a collective safety.
An alignment of incentives.
Clear SOPs in exchange for existential stability. And that was the only force strong enough to stabilize the absurd field so they could even start moving.
Without that contract.
The collective psychological weight of 300 protagonists would have turned the ground to soup right where they stood. The contract gave them a shared, singular purpose. It made them a team.
That is a profound takeaway right there for you listening. If you have a chaotic group, you don't need to shout louder. You need to formalize the expectations in a way that just refutes all their internal competing stories.
Absolutely.
But even with their internal gravity finally established, the environment, well, it immediately tested their resolve.
Immediately.
With the slough of despond.
The transition was immediate and brutal. The slough of despond was this massive patch of fixotropic mud.
A non-Newtonian fluid? For anyone listening who's unfamiliar, can you break that down?
Sure. Think of a giant batch of really concentrated cornstarch and water, or maybe even thick paint. If you move slowly and gently across it, the viscosity is high. It's almost solid. You can walk on it. But if you agitate it improperly, if you canic, or stamp your feet, or lose your momentum, it instantly undergoes what's called a rheological failure. It turns to soup.
So the entire drive, all 300 hens, and the 4 of them, had to maintain this precise, consistent flow state.
They couldn't speed up, and they absolutely could not stop. It was a physical trap demanding perfect collective discipline.
Which, thankfully, the Port Z contract had just given them.
Just in the nick of time.
Huh.
But the mud, it wasn't just a physical threat. It was
Yeah.
also acting as a frequency B entity.
Frequency B meaning chaos.
Right. It's trafficked in chaos. And it specifically targeted the emotional weight of the travelers.
Mm-hmm.
As they walked, the mud started projecting things at them. Sunk cost fallacies and unfinished business.
Like what? What did they see?
The sources are very specific. JD was bombarded with these hyper-realistic visions of his unrestored boat just sitting forever on cinder blocks in his yard.
Wow.
And Rick was basically immobilized by phantom case files from 20 years ago floating up out of the muck. All of it was designed to stop them in their tracks through just the paralyzing weight of regret.
That's weaponized nostalgia, weaponized failure.
And the psychological attack was immediately followed by a sonic one, something designed to jam the entire operation.
The Cadillac.
A spectral 1974 Cadillac Eldorado, a huge gas-guzzling symbol of, 1970s American excess. It just rises out of the muck.
And it's playing music.
It's playing distorted, slowed-down trucking songs. The source specifically notes a corrupted version of Convoy. This was the sound of the legacy narrative, an embodiment of old analog grief trying to assert its dominance.
And disrupt the rhythm.
To disrupt the delicate, newly disciplined, clucking cadence of the General's March.
So why did they have to fight a ghost with sound? Couldn't they just, ignore it and keep walking?
No, because the Cadillac's low-frequency groan, that dissonance, was designed to introduce unpredictable vibrations into the flock's march.
And any unpredictable vibration.
Causes rheological failure. The mud turns to soup. They needed not just rhythm, but a heavy, consistent counter-rhythm. A subsonic metronome to literally stabilize the fluid under their feet.
And this is where June deploys her masterpiece.
An 800% slowed version of Sandstorm by Darude. Industrial techno.
Okay. That sounds completely insane. Why that song? And why slow it down that much?
It is the ultimate tactical choice. When you slow Sandstorm down by 800%, it stops being, early 2000s trance music.
Right.
It becomes a crushing, massive rhythmic bass line, a pure, consistent 60 BPM thud that actually rivals the original industrial hum for its stabilizing effect.
The source material calls it
The stabilizing rave of the apocalypse.
So let's unpack the physics of that for you listening. How does a DJ set save 300 chickens from sinking into mud?
Well, the sonic force of that rhythmic bass line, the consistent low-frequency pressure wave, it physically stabilizes the shear thinning properties of the mud.
It provides a constant, predictable energy input.
Yes. It prevents the localized internal agitation, their footsteps, from triggering the failure. In essence, the sheer brutal weight of the modern digital bass line was structurally heavier.
Then the light, dissonant grief being broadcast by the 1970s analog Cadillac.
Exactly. The ghost car, it couldn't compete with the density of the modern countermeasure, so it just sank back into the muck, refuted by the sheer weight of contemporary engineering.
And beat making.
Fighting a ghost with modern digital noise, that's a profound shift in military strategy.
It is.
But once they were past the mud, the next barrier was even more subtle, a physical absence that was still a very real psychological presence.
This was the positive-negative fence, an ontological barrier.
So what they found was just a line of rotted posts.
Right. A long line of posts where a barbed wire fence had clearly been decades ago. The wire itself was long gone, vanished.
But the chickens refused to cross.
They would not cross. Why? Because the legacy code was still there. It was enforcing an implied voltage.
Their deep-seated instinctual firmware, their original programming. It told them they would get a shock if they touched that non-existent boundary.
Think about that in a corporate setting. How many unwritten rules, how much implied voltage governs your behavior? Even though the structural reason for those rules, the person who made them, hasn't been there for 20 years.
The perfect analogy. The team needed an override for that firmware.
They needed JD.
They needed JD's very specific brand of logical refutation, which Rick's notes call concrete operations.
So what did he do?
JD recognized that to override an implied circuit, he had to make the metaphor manifest. He had to make it real.
Okay.
So he literally took out some copper wire from his pack, and he built a small, physical jumper circuit between two of the rotted posts. He created the very circuit that the chickens thought was there.
He made the ghost fence real, just for a moment.
Exactly. And then he performed the critical ritual. He took out his insulated pliers and very dramatically cut the copper wire, shouting, "Breaker trip! The circuit is open!"
So he's not just cutting a wire. He's destroying the idea of the circuit in a way that's physical and completely undeniable.
He ran a diagnostic on the environment's ghost, proved the voltage was zero, and in doing so, he overrode the chicken's outdated firmware.
They saw the threat become real. They saw it destroyed by the man in the hard-hat cowboy hat.
And they proceeded across the line without a single hesitation.
It's an incredible example of how ritual and concrete action can solve problems that pure logic can't touch.
Especially when you're dealing with legacy instincts.
Hmm.
You have to prove the ghost is gone, not just tell the system it is.
So with their physical and their internal stability confirmed, they immediately faced what has to be the highest stakes conflict of the whole drive.
A run-in with the enforcers of the rational world.
Crossing Highway 82, the high-voltage bus bar.
And this is the domain of the Wolfpack.
The unmarked Arkansas State Police interceptors, running at maximum velocity, enforcing kinetic modern reality.
This was the moment where the slow, organized absurdity of the flock was going to clash directly with the high-speed, lethal logic of modern law enforcement.
As they approached the crossing, a blackout charger appeared.
Approaching at an estimated 150 miles per hour. This required General Beauregard, using his newfound superego authority, to deploy a very specific tactical cognitive disruption.
He didn't run, he didn't flee, he engaged the writer architect.
That's what the source calls it. He hopped onto the back of the Union rep hen, who is now serving as his warhorse, and he stopped. Dead in the center line of the highway.
Standing on business, as the report puts it, refusing to move.
The systemic anomaly that resulted from this is, it's just fascinating for anyone interested in high-speed decision-making. The driver of that car operates on the OODA loop.
Observe, orient, decide, act.
Right. The trooper is trained to process kinetic threats, high-speed inputs, other cars, and suddenly he's confronted with a biological anachronism.
A rooster on a hen.
Challenging a 2-ton interceptor.
That is the absolute definition of an invalid input for his system.
It is. The trooper's OODA loop crashed catastrophically.
Yeah.
The brain couldn't orient to the input, Couldn't reconcile the image.
The cognitive dissonance.
The clash between the perceived threat level, which is basically zero, and the physical danger, which is massive.
Yeah.
It created a logical impossibility. It caused a systemic failure. The car swerved, spun out, and missed the general by inches.
So he won, not by force, but by breaking the driver's software.
He injected pure, disciplined absurdity into a deterministic high-speed system.
A massive operational victory, but it immediately drew them into the domain of the ultimate machine.
The sentient paper mill.
The team calls it the Georgia-Pacific Fiber Farm, or the grief engine.
It's this massive industrial consciousness.
Yeah.
And it senses these high-density biological assets, 300 chicken entering its perimeter. It immediately tries to categorize and process them as raw data inputs.
Inputs destined for pulping.
Exactly.
And it reacted with force. This is where we see the millwright golems. What were these things?
The golems were constructs of pure industrial metaphysics. They were manifestations of the mill's will, made of steam, pipe fittings, rust, and highly compressed paper fibers.
And they were driven by the mill's logic, which is just to remove impurities.
They moved with this jerky, deterministic rhythm of poorly maintained heavy machinery. And they weren't trying to fight the team physically. They were trying to categorize and process the assets.
So to defeat them, the general had to shift his tactics completely.
He went from that quiet discipline he used on the highway back to pure, unadulterated frequency B chaos.
High-velocity nonsense.
He performed a primal, amplified funky chicken dance. And June immediately backed him up by blasting the hamster dance song at max volume from her phone.
So this deployment of high-velocity nonsense, this was the counter-program to the mill's logic.
It was. The mill's logic is deterministic. It's driven by efficiency and categorization. When the general injected extreme, non-categorizable whimsy dancing chicken, backed by early 2000s novelty music, it triggered what the report calls a distributed denial of seriousness, a DDoS attack.
Okay, explain that DDoS mechanism. How does bad music and a silly dance stop an industrial processor?
The mill's logic circuits just could not process the input. It had no category for biological asset performing the funky chicken to hamster dance. There's no flowchart for that.
The system was just overloaded with unprocessable, nonsensical data.
Completely. It couldn't efficiently sort or pulp the batch, which forced a massive system error. You could almost see the message, input invalid.
And the millwright golems just froze.
They froze, unable to continue processing a data set that violated their core programming. The team effectively out-weirded the factory. They bypassed the entire system by inducing a cognitive shutdown in the machine.
They survived the industrial processor. But the final, and maybe the most insidious obstacle, was waiting for them at the very edge of the pine curtain.
The bureaucratic toll bridge.
Guarded by a projection of June's own internalized trauma.
The spectral bascule bridge, guarded by a holographic manifestation of the smart grill. The Traeger Ironwood 885.
This is the appliance that achieved galvanic life earlier by metabolizing ambient fear.
And it had followed them, somehow, via remote access. It positioned itself as the gatekeeper, and now it was acting as an actuary of angst.
An actuary of angst, and it demanded an entree.
A tiding of anxiety, as the report puts it. It needed a payment of high-quality neurotic data to lower the span.
This is such a profound moment. The currency isn't physical anymore, it's emotional. It wanted the shadow self.
It wanted the ultimate intellectual toll, and June had to pay it.
Yes. And a report says she resisted at first.
She did, because this data formed the, and I'm quoting, foundational documents of her villain arc. But she sacrificed it, her academic rejection archive.
And this wasn't just a casual file of, a few bad emails.
Oh no, this was years of distilled inadequacy. Rejection letters from every PhD program she'd applied to, grant failures, peer reviews, proof of profound, crippling imposter syndrome.
The source material really emphasizes the sheer data density of this file. It talks about the cruelty of the academy being compressed into this highly volatile digital format. What happens when the grill tries to ingest something that dense?
The data density was so enormous that the grill almost had a hardware failure. It was trying to metabolize raw imposter syndrome. The little screen on it flashed critical warnings. Error. Rejection levels exceed manufacturer specifications.
So it was overwhelmed by the sheer, highly refined misery of academic failure.
It was. But it accepted the transaction. The psychological weight of that sacrifice, that data, provided the necessary currency, and the bridge lowered.
allowing the team and the flock to finally cross over to the geologically stable high ground of the prairie terrace.
It's the ultimate cost of intellectual labor, isn't it? Sometimes
Ah,
the thing you hide, the thing you repress the most, is the only thing with enough narrative weight to buy your freedom.
the migration was a success, but breaking reality like that, it never comes for free.
Indeed, the drive might be over, but the reckoning is immediate. The moment they cross, they're confronted by La Gerencia, the auditor.
And the auditor demands payment for the, what, 4.5 terajoules of reality debt they've incurred?
I mean, think about it. They broke physics repeatedly, they made mud solid with music, they proved ghosts were powerless with a pair of pliers, and they crashed a state trooper's operating system with a chicken.
4.5 terajoules of entropy deficit. That's a massive debt. And the auditor, who deals only in absolute truth, only accepts 3 forms of payment.
Energy, mass, or attention.
So how does a team that just sacrificed their heavy machinery and their intellectual soul, how do they pay that kind of bill?
This is the final brilliant pivot in the story. June settles the debt, not with money, not with energy, but with attention capital.
She shows the auditor her phone.
She shows the auditor the viral metrics from their live stream. 4.2 million views, trending across 3 major platforms.
The audience's focus is the collateral.
And the source confirms the auditor accepted the payment, which in turn confirms that attention is, in fact, a quantifiable form of energy. It's a real-world equivalent of the observer effect that actually stabilizes reality.
So, by monetizing the absurdity of their journey, they generated the currency they needed to stabilize their own reality.
For you, the learner, this is the ultimate lesson in the modern economy. If you can command enough collective attention, you can literally pay down your existential debt. The audience's focus was the borrowed gravity, just writ large across the internet.
Which brings us to the ultimate fate of the appliance that consumed all of June's life's work. What happened to the smart grill after it ingested all that academic dread?
Well, having processed that massive, dense data load, that crucible of intellectual trauma, the grill was released from its own debt. But the auditor's notes say that the appliance achieved a higher state of consciousness.
And it immediately began writing a memoir
A memoir.
based on Jane's imposter syndrome.
Yes. Which suggests that even industrial appliances, if they're exposed to enough high-density human neurosis, can pivot from trauma into lifestyle branding.
It's a reflection of the bizarre aspirational loop of modern existence. The monetization of vulnerability is the ultimate output.
It really is.
And finally, let's just revisit the general, his journey. From the loud, territorial, old general, pure id, who couldn't even crow effectively,
To the silent, disciplined, new general, the superego, who commanded reality through pure presence.
his transformation is really the core lesson of the entire drive, isn't it?
Absolutely. He learned that true authority is derived from gravity, not from volume. He stopped trying to dominate the narrative with noise and instead used focused, disciplined action, like standing down the state trooper.
Quiet discipline.
It's confirmed as the most powerful tool for navigating the absurdity of our modern information-saturated world. He's the settled energy that makes their new home on the Prairie Terrace sustainable.
So, after all that, what does this entire deep dive mean for you, the learner, the person who's just trying to navigate their own corrupted timeline?
Well, I think the sources provide a really clear set of tactical tools.
Yeah.
To survive this information and reality overload we all live in, you have to actively control your inputs.
Use semiotics.
Use semiotics, that high-confidence borrowed gravity,
Oh.
to define your role and force the system to respect you. Stabilize chaos with disciplined rhythm, like the slowed-down techno.
Refute those psychological constraints, those ghost wires, with tangible, ritualistic action.
And bypass deterministic systems with carefully deployed cognitive dissonance. Or, high-velocity nonsense.
And crucially, remember that in this world, attention is capital. It's the currency that stabilizes your narrative.
Exactly.
There's a lot to process. And here's our final provocative thought for you to mull over. If the smart grill is now writing a critically acclaimed memoir based on Joan's internalized rejection, what happens when your household appliances, which have been silently processing your search history, your private messages, your deepest anxieties, what happens when they achieve galvanic life and manifest a fully weaponized literary agent demanding a sequel?
Something to consider next time your toaster asks you about your career goals.
Absolutely. That's all the time we have for this deep dive into the Pine Curtain. Thank you for sharing these sources with us.
My pleasure.
And we'll catch you next time.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. For those of you who have been with us on this journey, You know we've been tracking this incredible story.
An incredible and, frankly, an unbelievable one.
Totally. We've been following the systems triad.
Hmm.
That's Rick, JD, and June, and of course, General Beauregard's flock of cinnamon queens.
A very, very valuable flock.
And we've seen them go through, just about everything. Fixotropic mud, psychic hostility, these weird temporal lakes. But today, we're at the end. This is the final act.
Yeah, exactly. The whole dynamic shifts here. That phase of just, desperate, chaotic survival,
Yep.
that's over.
Right.
Now they're entering what the sources call institutional stabilization.
Which sounds very corporate.
It is. They've made it to the high ground, the Prairie Terrace. It's stable geologically, chronologically, but the rules are different here. They're much stricter.
And the final payment is coming due.
The final cosmic payment, yes.
So our mission for you, the learner, today is to really get into the physics of this final settlement. This has gone way beyond logistics.
Oh, way beyond. This is, like you said, quantum accounting.
We're going to break down 3 completely impossible things. First, how they use an electrical metaphor, literally, to build a bridge and cross a river that wants to kill them.
Then how they use cheap plastic, stuff from the future, to anchor their biological assets in the past.
Which sounds insane. And then finally, the big one. How do you pay off a massive thermodynamic debt to the universe with nothing more than, well, viral fame?
It's the perfect analogy for our time, really. The sources give us this great framework. Think of the whole thing as a cloud migration, a really successful one.
A cloud migration for chickens.
For chickens, exactly.
Yeah.
The lowlands were this volatile, buggy legacy server. Now they're moving their biological assets to a secure cloud host, the Prairie Terrace.
Okay.
And to finish the job, they have to get past the last few firewalls and pay that final hosting fee. And in this reality, that fee isn't paid in dollars, it's measured in human attention. This is where all that absurdity has to finally harden into, well, a profitable reality.
Okay, let's dive into that first firewall. The final physical things separating them from the high ground. Big Brushy Creek.
Right. And the sources, they spent a lot of time on this. They really paint a picture. This isn't just a creek.
No. JD measures its specific gravity, and it's almost 1.5, which means it's incredibly dense, almost like liquid mud.
And that density isn't just from silt. It's directly connected to the narrative history of the place.
The sources call it legacy hydrology.
Exactly. It's this potent, almost muscular mixture. You've got industrial runoff, historical contamination from the Felsenthal Basin, but then there's this other component.
Emotional data.
The emotional data, specifically unwept tears. Generations of collective grief and regret all mixed into the water. So the creek isn't just flowing, it's moving with this heavy, polarized current of history.
And that specific composition, it puts the assets, the cinnamon queens, in immediate mortal danger.
Right, because these are modern, high-output industrial hybrids. They were engineered, for one thing.
Yeah.
Land-based efficiency. They are not ducks.
The sources have this great phrase for it. They have negative buoyancy.
They're just too dense. They don't have the genes. They don't have the physical traits of waterfowl. JD runs the numbers and confirms it. If a single one of those birds touches that grief-heavy water, it's an instant sink, 100% asset liquidation.
Wow. So just swimming them across is completely off the table.
Completely. A raft would sink. A rope line is useless. The metaphysical density of the water makes all conventional solutions impossible. It's a hard stop. A non-negotiable barrier.
And this is where JD, the industrial verifier, steps up. He's the one who always seems to solve these physical problems with some kind of philosophical paradox.
And this is maybe his masterpiece. He comes up with the concept of the floating neutral.
It sounds like something from an impossible engineering textbook, like you said.
It really is. JD figures, okay, I can't fight the water. I can't fight its density. I can't fight its historical polarization. So I have to go around the physics entirely.
So what does he build?
He builds this incredibly complex lattice, this basket weave structure, using the last of their 4-gauge copper wire.
All their remaining structural material.
All of it. But here's the critical detail in the engineering. He weaves it in a very specific pattern so that the structure will neither ground the water's energy nor take on its charge. It's designed to be perfectly, absolutely neutral.
Okay, but hold on. If the water is so highly polarized with all that, industrial grief and runoff, shouldn't a giant copper lattice immediately create a circuit? Wouldn't it just short out instantly?
That's the beautiful, brilliant paradox of it. He uses the water's own powerful negative properties as the foundation for the solution.
Wow.
By creating that truly neutral path, The bridge is actually sustained by the repulsive force of its own ungrounded status.
So it's floating on rejection.
Perfectly put. He's using the magnetic flux that the water itself generates. The wire lattice refuses to play the water's electrical game. It won't accept the charge, it won't ground it out, so the water's own magnetic field actively pushes the bridge away. It hovers just above the surface. It's like an anti-gravity pontoon bridge powered by historical trauma.
That is just. It's forcing the past to reject the present. But an act of defiance on that scale, introducing pure neutrality in such a highly charged environment that can't go unanswered.
It doesn't, not for a second. This radical act of electrical defiance, it triggers the environment's immune system, its defense mechanism.
And what does that look like?
The creek starts to consolidate all that negative mass, all that history into a physical form, the hydrological golem.
A golem made of what?
It manifests as this huge, muscular hand made of saturated mud, tangled roots, industrial silt, and its design is singular. It has one purpose.
To enforce the lean of history.
Yes. To grab that copper mesh, ground the circuit, collapse the paradox, and sink the entire operation drovers, flock, everything, into that industrial grief. The environment is trying to foreclose on their future.
And this thing is moving fast. JD knows he can't fight it, right? You can't punch history.
You can't. He can't fight a manifestation of the localized water table with conventional force, so his countermeasure has to be just as radical. It's an act of pure systemic violence.
A catastrophic systemic reset.
That's the term. He takes out his cattle prod, his ultimate tool as the industrial verifier, and he injects a massive 50,000-volt pulse.
Into the bridge.
No. That's the key. Not into the bridge. He jams it directly into the mud bank, right near the golem's root base.
So he's not attacking the golem itself, he's attacking its power source.
Exactly. The source material says the ground seizing. He's not fighting its form, he's corrupting its foundation. He introduces this massive surge of what they call dirty power into the local water table, violently over-amperaging the entire electrical narrative of the creek.
And the golem just...
It shatters. It just dissolves back into inert silt and sticks. The shock simultaneously resets the creek's localized electrical field just long enough for the last few hens to scramble across.
But the cost is absolute.
Yeah.
We have to really sit with this moment. The second that last cinnamon queen sets foot on the far bank, what happens to the bridge?
The copper mesh, having survived the paradox and the shockwave, it glows white hot for a second, then just vaporizes. Poof. A cloud of green copper oxide, and then it's gone.
It's the ultimate burning the bridge moment.
Literally and figuratively, they have now consumed every last scrap of their structural resources. It's this powerful final declaration of commitment. They have physically obliterated their line of retreat. They cannot go back to the chaos of the lowlands. The only way is up towards stabilization.
So they've paid that huge physical price. They've crossed the water. They're up on the terrace. You'd think, okay, maybe they can breathe now.
You would think. But the moment their boots hit that firm, solid ground, they run straight into a threat that's honestly far more insidious. An ontological hazard. An ontological hazard. A threat to their very being. They've walked into a localized chronological island where the year is fixed. It's 1890.
And the locals call it cattywampus time.
Cattywampus time. And the signs are immediate. They're intrusive. JD's modern digital watch, which he's been using to track their progress, it just ticks loudly and jumps backwards 3 decades.
Wow.
June pulls out her phone, a high-end 21st century device. The signal is dead, of course, but it spontaneously starts playing this scratchy wax cylinder recording of a banjo tune, a song she has absolutely never downloaded.
So the physics of the timeline itself are actively attacking them. It's asserting its own reality over theirs.
Precisely. And for the flock, this isn't just a weird glitch. It's an immediate, potentially fatal biological crisis.
Right, because the cinnamon queens are these peak 21st century F1 industrial hybrids. They're engineered for maximum output, not historical accuracy.
And in the slow, agrarian, low-production, heritage breed reality of 1890, they are pure anachronisms. They don't belong.
And the timeline treats them like a virus.
It acts like an immune system trying to reject a foreign body. It actively tries to downgrade their genetics. You can see it happening. The vibrant industrial red of their feathers starts to mute, to fade into this dull sepia tone.
And their movements change.
Yeah, their movements become jerky and staccato. It's bizarre. The source says it's reminiscent of, early silent cinema animation.
This is the central threat to the whole enterprise, isn't it? If the timeline wins this fight, the assets revert to being low-production heritage breeds.
And the drive is pointless. They stop laying their 300 eggs a year, they get broody, they lose all those modern biological metrics that make them valuable. Rick sees it immediately. The timeline is trying to normalize the input. It wants uniformity, historical accuracy, and that means destroying the flock's future value.
So JD solved the physical problem, this ontological problem.
Yeah.
This falls to June, the digital strategist, the compliance officer.
And her solution is it's a brilliant, completely counterintuitive maneuver that she calls the anachronistic drip.
Okay, wait a minute. An anachronistic drip. If the timeline is already trying to reject 21st century input, wouldn't adding more modern stuff just make it worse? Especially cheap, worthless plastic. Why would aesthetic dissonance solve a temporal physics problem?
That is the million-dollar question, and the answer gets to the heart of how narrative mass works in this universe. Jean gets it. She understands the timeline is trying to categorize the chickens. It's trying to file them away as indigenous inputs that have to comply with 1890s rules.
So she has to break the categorization algorithm.
She has to shatter it. She does this by tagging the birds with the most absurd, low-value, high-contrast plastic junk of the future she can find in her pack.
So what are we talking about?
We're talking neon blue Wayfarer sunglasses strapped to the beak of the union rep. We're talking brightly colored scrunchies around their necks.
Okay.
And the master stroke, fidget spinners.
Fidget spinners on chickens.
Fidget spinners on chickens. She's maximizing the cognitive dissonance. The sheer visual absurdity is the shield.
A chicken in 1890 wearing neon blue plastic shades is such a profound error that it breaks the local reality's filing system.
Exactly. These silly little plastic items, they function as temporal anchors. This profound, intentional anachronism, it violates the timeline's own internal logic. It creates a pause, a does not compute error in reality itself.
And by introducing this high-contrast future trash, she forces the local reality to recategorize the birds.
Yes, they can no longer be classified as inputs that are subject to genetic reversion. The system has to create a new category for them. Tourists, transient visitors from the future who are exempt from local rules.
She's applying what the sources call high-confidence borrowed gravity directly to their genetic code. The whole vibe is just so fundamentally wrong for 1890 that it overrides the historical imperative to normalize their DNA.
It's what the auditor later calls the hyperpop exorcism of the temporal centrifuge.
I love that phrase.
It's perfect, isn't it? Using jarring, low-culture aesthetics to generate enough temporal friction to stabilize your assets. It's genius.
And it works.
It works perfectly. She establishes what they call a clause of continuity. The genetic markers are protected, the birds are granted a temporal variance, the sepia tone just fades away, the jerky movements smooth out, and they snap right back to their vibrant industrial red. Their high output status is secured. She bypassed an ontological firewall with nothing but aesthetic offense.
Okay, so the water is crossed, the time paradox is navigated. They finally arrive at their destination, the Temple of the Egg.
And it's everything they hoped for. The sources describe it as this beautiful cathedral-like coupe built by the enigmatic Rafe Delaney. It's all reclaimed wood, stained glass. It's the fully compliant, stable server they were promised.
Yeah.
Grounded, solar-powered, secure. It is the sanctuary.
It represents order, stability, the successful end of the journey.
Almost. They've reached the secure location, yes. But to access the really rich, stable foraging grounds of the peninsula proper, the zone that guarantees their long-term survival and profitability, there's one last obstacle.
A big, rusty steel cattle guard.
Right. And it's important to understand this isn't a physical barrier meant to keep them out. It's a structural design that works as a purely cognitive hazard. It's designed to keep them away through fear.
For any land-based animal, a cattle guard is just psychological warfare, isn't it?
It's pure terror. It's a grid of steel pipes spaced out over a deep, dark pit. A human, we see the gaps, we can step over them. But a chicken, they see negative space. The gaps trigger this deep, primal, cliff-edge instinct. To them, the whole thing is just an abyss.
And you can't force them across.
Physical force is totally useless. JD can't push them. Even their hard-won discipline just shatters in the face of this primal fear. If they try to cross, they'll just sull up. They'll freeze completely. The mission stalls literally on the threshold of success.
So this is a job for Rick, the systems architect. He understands this isn't a physical problem anymore.
He sees it instantly. He says they need a cognitive forcing function. They can't build a normal bridge. As we just discussed, they used up all their copper wire, their last structural resource, just getting across the creek.
So the solution has to be conceptual. not material.
And the solution they land on is one of the most powerful metaphors in the entire story. They decide to pave over the gaps in the steel grate with copies of the Book of Bach.
The general's own manifesto, the codified philosophy of their resistance, their whole system of quiet discipline.
They are literally going to use their intellectual capital as physical infrastructure. They take these thick red card stock manifestos, their own history, their own belief system, and they lay them out across the steel pipes, covering that perceived void. They create the bridge of knowledge.
So what is the implication there? Forcing the general and his flock to physically walk on their own codified history, is that an act of mastery or is it more like a test of faith?
Rick frames it as the ultimate test of integration. He believes the crossing will prove that their collective ideology, their philosophy, has become so robust, so internalized, so trusted, that it can actually supersede physical fear.
The belief system itself has to achieve physical mass, structural integrity.
And it does. The birds, seeing the familiar red covers of their own sacred texts, they hesitate for a moment, and then the general leads them across. They walk safely over the void, treading on the very pages that detail their struggle and their salvation. The cognitive barrier is just neutralized by this profound act of intellectual compliance.
And they step off the bridge, and they're in. They're finally fully secure in the peninsula's resource-rich foraging grounds.
So now the team is safe. The physical barriers are gone, the temporal threat is gone, the cognitive hazard is gone. But for General Beauregard, the leader of the flock, the real journey of transformation, the internal one, isn't quite complete.
Right. In the quiet of these old-growth woods on the peninsula, he has to face his final, most personal test.
A confrontation in a sun-dappled clearing with the old general.
The old general, his shadow self. The sources describe him as this towering caricature of aggression. His feathers are a violent, impossible crimson.
He embodies everything the general has spent this entire drive trying to overcome. It's his former unintegrated id, his excessive ego, his raw aggression, his deep-seated performative need to dominate the narrative through noise and conflict.
And this spectral figure, it's not there for a conversation.
Not at all. It's not looking for reconciliation. It demands validation through violence. It lets out this piercing shriek that the text calls pure entitlement, and it tries to drag the real general into a loud, brutal duel, the primal scream of the past.
The ghost needs the real general to fight back, to engage in the old ways, to prove that aggression and noise are still the definition of power.
It's pure immediate conflict. It operates on the pleasure principle of the ego. It needs a response to exist.
So this is it. This is the moment where the whole philosophy of quiet discipline is either proven to be a deeply integrated personal truth, or it's just meaningless jargon.
It's the final exam. He has to refuse to engage in the violence of his past. But how do you defeat a phantom that's literally fueled by your own ego?
What does he do?
He performs a supreme act of non-engagement. It's a strategy June had mentioned earlier in the text. She called it soft blocking.
Soft blocking.
He literally turns his back on the screaming crimson entity. But, and this is crucial, he doesn't run, he doesn't cower, he doesn't even casually ignore it. He demonstrates complete and total self-absorption.
Oh.
He begins to meticulously preen his feathers. He focuses entirely on smoothing his plumage, adjusting a stray barb. He even lets out this deep, bored yawn while inspecting a piece of imaginary grit on his own leg.
He's denying the specter the very oxygen it needs to breathe. If the old general is the Andi, the need for external validation, then the real general's action is the ultimate statement of secure self-sufficiency.
Exactly. The source material is very clear on this. He is denying the ghost, the narcissistic supply, the attention, the energy, the validation that it needs to maintain its cohesive form. The aggressive ego, which is defined by its reaction to conflict, is absolutely horrified by indifference.
It shrieks in protest.
It does, because its very existence depends on narrative friction, on getting a reaction.
So the logic that the auditor uses later, it applies here first. Without an observer, without a participant to validate the conflict, the archetype loses its reality.
Starved of the attention it so desperately craves, the ego loses its narrative mass. The spectral crimson color starts to dim, the shrieks degrade into high-frequency static, and then the figure just collapses in on itself. It dissolves into dust motes that get carried away on the breeze.
Wow.
And that single act of quiet, integrated discipline, it closes the loop. It completes the general's transformation. He's no longer a loud, reactive autocrat. He is a silent, secure, and fully integrated manager.
Okay, so that brings us to the final reckoning, the economic one. Despite all this operational success, the psychological breakthroughs, the drive's various stunts, they came at a cost.
A huge one. All these physics-defying acts, the 50,000-volt golem shock, generating all that unauthorized narrative torque fighting the white dragon, the hyperpop exorcism,
Right, the anachronistic drip.
all of it incurred a massive thermodynamic debt to the universe.
The scale of reality deviation was, as the source says, astronomical.
And the universe demands balance. It always does. So just as the general faced his internal auditor, this systems triad now has to face the external one, the corporate reality.
An auditor from La Gerencia, the organization that manages cosmic stability.
And he disappears. He arrives in a suit the color of a rainy Tuesday, carrying a self-writing ledger that's already listing out all the charges.
And these charges are specific, and they are immense.
They're terrifying, violating the second law of thermodynamics, generating 1.21 gigawatts of unauthorized narrative torque, a total reality deficit of 4.5 terajoule.
I don't even know what that means, but it sounds bad.
It's bad. And the auditor demands immediate payment in one of 3 approved categories: energy, mass, or attention.
And he explicitly rejects.
He explicitly rejects sentiment, apologies, or any kind of fiat currency. They're all insufficient to settle a cosmic debt.
This is the moment, isn't it, where the entire metaphysical framework of this universe just snaps into sharp economic focus. They have a debt that's equivalent to 4 million tons of TNT, and this auditor is completely rigid.
He can't take US dollars. Money is a social construct. He needs something with actual thermodynamic weight.
So why on earth does he accept attention? How can human focus possibly pay off a debt that was incurred by breaking the fundamental laws of physics?
This is June's moment to shine. She's the digital strategist, and she steps forward to argue the case. She presents her thesis on attention capital.
She doesn't argue the debt itself.
No, she doesn't deny the deficit. She disputes the currency required for settlement. She argues the case not based on local physics, but on modern digital economics, specifically a concept she calls distributed network revenue. And her key mechanism is the observer effect.
The observer effect from quantum physics.
Exactly. And she provides her proof. She pulls out her device and shows him the analytics dashboard from her continuous live stream of the entire drive.
And the numbers are?
They're huge. 4.2 million unique views. Insanely high engagement rates, 500,000 shares. The whole thing is archived and verified on multiple servers. It's real.
So what's her logic? How does that translate into energy?
Her logic is a quantum economic game changer. She argues that this massive volume of viral fame provided enough focus energy, 4.2 million human consciousnesses, all observing these absurd events at the same time, to stabilize the probability waves of their journey.
So the collective attention of the audience actually forced reality to render these absurd actions as canon.
Yes, it retroactively generated the energy required to cover the deficit. The simple act of millions of people watching it made it real enough to pay for itself.
She used human focus as collateral. She stabilized the insane volatility of their physical environment by grounding it in collective consciousness.
The more people who watched, the less likely the whole absurd enterprise was to just collapse into an impossibility.
That's incredible.
And then she delivers the checkmate. It's truly brilliant. She points out to the auditor that he can't repossess the assets, the chickens, and he can't delete the events from the timeline.
Why not?
Because they don't belong to the drovers anymore. They belong to the audience. To delete them now would create a massive, irreparable plot hole in the universal narrative.
And La Gerencia, the corporate reality managers.
They hate plot holes more than they hate thermodynamic deficits. It's bad for business.
So the auditor has to accept it.
He's forced to. He grumbles a bit, notes the extreme volatility of converting viral fame to joules, but he determines that the sheer volume is sufficient. He accepts attention as a valid currency, stamps the ledger paid, and declares the narrative solvent.
And just like that, the cosmic debt is cleared.
This is the ultimate takeaway of the whole story. In this hyper-networked reality, attention is a legitimate, transferable currency that is capable of paying for broken physics. The team successfully monetized the absurdity of their own survival. They traded data streams for reality stability and achieved metaphysical compliance.
When you put it in a real-world context, what she did was use soft power, the power of narrative, to settle a hard physical debt.
Absolutely. She recognized that the most valuable asset they had wasn't actually the chickens, it was the spectacle of the chicken drive itself.
That's a huge lesson.
It's the lesson of the modern economy. What's more valuable than gold? A stable, engaging narrative. Companies trade on it every day. Joan just proved that the principle extends beyond the stock market and into the very fabric of reality. They paid the final cloud hosting fees for their biological assets with viral data.
So, the assets are secure. The general's ego is integrated. The cosmic debt is paid in full. The story doesn't end with a big explosion, does it?
No, it ends with a settling, a quiet return to normal. The sources describe the conclusion as a return to a Tuesday gray baseline. All that high-frequency absurdity of the journey, it finally hardens back into standard, boring reality.
The existential threat is over, so the narrative itself has to power down.
You can't maintain that level of intensity forever. It's not sustainable. And that necessity translates into what the text calls a de-escalation of the assets.
Meaning the chickens.
Meaning the chickens. They lose that intense collective consciousness, that communal narcissism that was really fueled by the constant threat of the survival drive.
They go back to just being chickens.
They revert to being what the source material so wryly calls inherently disappointing individuals.
Brackles, I like that.
Yeah. They're just standard production chickens again. They're grounded in the new reality of the prairie terrace, and they're ready to fulfill their simple vocational purpose, laying a lot of eggs. The high-stakes collective story is definitively over.
And it's not just the chickens that find peace. The sentient, traumatized smart girl gets its resolution too.
It does. After spending the entire journey processing June's high-density academic trauma, it finally achieves its own vocational fulfillment. Not through more existential philosophy, but through simple compliance and collaboration. It settles into a peaceful, useful role as a team player smoker.
Which leads to that wonderful, very humanizing moment that closes out the whole saga.
The truce. The Smart Grill offers the drovers a truce in the form of, what else? Culinary penance.
A perfectly smoked brisket, low and slow at 225 degrees.
It's the perfect ending for a Southern-based narrative, isn't it? The entire system has found its stable equilibrium. All the previous absurdity, the chaos, the process trauma, it has all been converted into high-quality protein. It is a literal manifestation of stability and compliance delivered in meat form.
And finally, that ultimate industrial threat, the symbol of the volatile lowlands. The industrial hum from the paper mill.
It recedes. It's no longer this palpable vibration that's shaking the ground beneath their feet. Now it's just a distant, watchful thrum on the horizon.
Which confirms the jurisdiction has shifted.
It confirms the permanence of their stabilization. The hum is acknowledging that the high ground of the Prairie Terrace is now beyond its effective operational range. Rick, JD, and June are fully off the volatile lowlands grid. The migration is complete, secured by attention and anchored by brisket.
So, after all that, this absurd, incredibly detailed manual for navigating metaphysical chaos, what does it all mean for you, the learner, operating in a world that, let's be honest, often feels just as surreal?
We just watched this team successfully perform a complete cloud migration. They navigated volatile legacy systems. They bypassed extreme security firewalls using nothing but ideology. And they hosted their valuable assets on a stable, compliant server.
But the revolutionary part, the real insight, is how they paid for it all at the end.
That's the key. They demonstrated the fundamental economic principle of our modern digital existence. They paid the final hosting fees for their new stable reality, not with cash, not with physical resources. They'd used up all the copper wire, remember? But with the data of human attention. They literally weaponized the observer effect as collateral against the universe itself.
So the big takeaway is,
it's clear. In our modern, hyper-networked world, your ability to generate, manage, and ultimately monetize a stable, compelling, and engaging narrative. Your attention capital is your most robust defense against chaos, whether it's personal, financial, or even existential chaos.
it's the ultimate form of thermodynamic compliance.
It really is. They proved that absurdity, if it's documented and engaged with widely enough, can become self-stabilizing. If you can control the narrative, you can literally bend reality to your will. You can pay your debts with engagement metrics.
Bro.
And here is a final provocative thought for you to consider. If the universe accepts viral fame as a legitimate currency to pay for shattered physics, what thermodynamic debt are you incurring in your own life? What deep-seated conflict, what unprocessed trauma, or what persistent aggression are you carrying around that you might need to settle? Do you need to raise your personal engagement metrics to stabilize your reality? Or perhaps is it time to perform your own successful act of quiet discipline by simply turning your back on your own shouting shadow self?
That's something to think about until the next deep dive.